Welcome to What the Health, an independent approach to your health span. Have you noticed how our healthcare system may not have your best interest in mind? Join Dr. Eckel in this fun and sometimes disturbing exploration of the state of healthcare and what it means for you. Now, here's your host, Dr. Eckel.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Dr. Greg Eckel, and this is What the Health. And our topic today is one that you don't typically hear on a day-to-day basis, which is reversing dementia. And I have Dr. Heather Sandison on. She's the founder and medical director of the North County Natural Medicine Clinic and the founder of Marama. I want to make sure I pronounced that correct. Did I get that right?
Marama.
I knew it. Okay, Marama, which is really fascinating. I'm super excited to talk to you about, which is the first residential care facility of the elderly of its kind, and she's outside the San Diego area. Dr. Sandison specializes in neurocognitive medicine and neurohacking. She's trained to specifically address imbalances that affect the brain, especially neurodegeneration and disorders like Alzheimer's. She was awarded a grant to study an integrative, individualized approach to reversing dementia and looks forward to publishing the results in 2022. We're hoping to peek in under the hood on that today. She's trained with all of the greats, Dr. Dale Bredesen, Dr. Neil Nathan, Dr. Bill Walsh, Dr. Ritchie Shoemaker, basically the who's who in neurocognition and neurodegeneration and mold, et cetera, environmental medicine, Lyme, et cetera, difficult and recalcitrant conditions. She's committed to synthesizing the best in science, healthcare, and senior living to reimagine how we age. Welcome to What the Health, Dr. Sandison.
Thank you so much for having me.
My pleasure. And I am so excited to talk about all of the different facets that we've just laid out there. And, reversing dementia, this is not a topic that you hear every day, right? I mean, it's basically, the stats are it's the new diagnosis happening every 3 minutes. Neurodegeneration in general is on the rise. Where do we start with this? You picked this topic. You've got an inpatient care facility housing development. Let's maybe start with Marama and hear how did this come to fruition? Where did this come into play?
Yeah, so I started Marama as sort of an answer to a lot of the questions my patients were asking me. I was seeing really phenomenal results after being trained by Dr. Bredesen. Unexpectedly, I went into treating Alzheimer's. I wanted to do the training because it was like the hardest thing to tackle, right? Autism and neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's are those things you're told that there aren't solutions for. And so I kind of took the bait. I was like, there's a challenge. Let's go meet it. And then was surprised by how well people did, right? I had been told by very well-meaning instructors, like, don't give anyone false hope. You really can't reverse this. And then when it was happening in front of me in my office, I was literally moved to tears multiple times. And also emboldened by sort of the injustice, like how we cannot be telling people that there's nothing you can do when that is just factually inaccurate. I'm watching it happen and consistently watching it happen. So kind of with that happening in my office, I started to build a bit of a reputation. People were referring their family, their friends, and also calling with additional questions. Among them, hey, I really want my loved one to be on this protocol, but I just don't have the capacity to take care of them at home. Where can I send them? And I started looking around, and this is sort of that like divine intervention. I had someone bring it up to me in the morning, and by that afternoon, I had talked to a couple people and like done a little bit of research online, and it was essentially like, this is a go. Wow. And then we had, taken control of the property about 8 months later, which never happens to anybody who ever has a sort of an idea, right? It never happens that quickly. Of course, then we ran into COVID. But, that's a different story. And I'm proud of how we kind of went through that. No resident in the building got COVID. We had 5 staff that did, but we were really good and also got lucky. Again, divine intervention. We kept it from affecting the residents, from any one of them being diagnosed with COVID or having it. So Marama was born out of kind of the realization that the best in healthcare for those suffering with dementia did not exist in the place where dementia residents live, where dementia patients live. And so you're not going to be able to get that care to them. I had many people say, well, oh, I have an uncle who's in assisted living, or my mom's in assisted living. I'd really like her to be on a Bredesen type protocol. And I just had to throw up my hands at some point because they're fed cake and ice cream and put in front of TVs and told not to move, which is the opposite of the Bredesen approach, which is the foundations of which, like naturopathic medicine, part of why I was so drawn to him is his foundations are very much lifestyle based. How can we get the right nutrients in through diet? How can we heal the gut through diet? How can we heal the brain through diet? And how can we get people moving and sleeping really well? And all of these things that their stressors managed, all of these things that we know to be the foundations for health, how do we get them dialed? And that just doesn't happen, unfortunately, in a conventional residential care facility type setting.
Oh, I think, yeah, as far away as that from that you can get. I mean, this is such an exciting idea. And why I wanted to maybe lead with that one is, I mean, that is the future of care. And having it in, you had patients and their families saying just logistically, we can't do this, but they're living in assisted living. And so why not just provide the space and the training for the staff that everybody's on board, so that you're not fighting against the system of, the cake and ice cream and TV culture, and you're actually seeing results. So let's go. I mean, this is revolutionary. So I want to make a big deal out of this because it is, you do not hear in a talk reversing dementia. It's basically uncurable. So that component, I want to make sure people listening, I mean, one of the reasons why I created this platform and called it What the Health is that this is the truth, that you can actually reverse dementia. And you have all of the pedigrees and the training and the expertise and clinical experience to really speak authoritatively around this topic. And you're seeing it day to day in the clinic, which is the real world, right? It's not academia, it's not research based, but it's actually real people's lives being affected. And that, for me, being a clinician's clinician is so important and really is necessary. Like, of course, we'll take the best of the research world and we want all of that information, but to then put it into practice and make a difference in somebody's lives, it's revolutionary, right? And so tell us, like, maybe our listeners and viewers are saying, well, I've never heard about this, Dr. Greg. And Dr. Sandison, how does this work? Like, what are you doing to get, what have you found? What are the pieces of the puzzle for dementia? Because it's not one size fits all. And maybe this leads into maybe a little bit of your research and your grant, and you're going to be publishing some data. 2022 is just 6 months away.
No pressure. So what we've found, and you were alluding to this, it's such a great question, is what works. And the reductionistic model does not. We've proven that over and over again. And I think what a lot of people don't realize is that science, kind of the best in science for a long time, was hypothesizing that amyloid plaques were to blame for dementia, that if you had amyloid plaques, that was what was quote unquote causing dementia. Now, what Dr. Bredesen and his group have done is kind of flip that on its head. And when you look at all of these trials, literally billions of dollars have been spent to go down the path and doubling down on the path of getting rid of beta amyloid plaques. And all of those interventions, yes, many of them did get rid of beta amyloid plaques. But what happens is that it increases your dementia symptoms, right? So your memory actually worsens. And so what we can kind of surmise from that is that it's not the beta amyloid plaques that are the problem. And in fact, beta amyloid plaques and these tau proteins are, in many cases, they are there to protect us from what is actually causing the dementia. So the brain uses beta amyloid is very antimicrobial. And some of those people who have ApoE4 genetics, they actually are more likely to produce these beta amyloid plaques. And for our ancestors, this was a great thing. This actually prevented them from having diseases or parasites or any sort of microbe that might be affecting their brain. They would live longer. They would have better brain function than somebody who didn't have an ApoE4. In our day and age, when you're very quick to produce those beta amyloid plaques, and as we live longer, this makes you sort of, essentially you have symptoms of dementia quicker and sooner and with less instigation from these perturbations that can be microbial or toxic. And so when we start talking about what do we do to reverse dementia, we have to put this beta amyloid hypothesis to the side. We have to say, okay, that clearly is not explaining things, because as much time and money and effort has gone into going down that path, it just doesn't work. And the Biogen pharmaceutical, the IV, I mean, how misguided. I don't want to go on too much of a tangent there, but just this is why it's so misguided, is because it goes after beta amyloids, not why are the beta amyloids being produced by the brain? What is the brain trying to protect itself from? So when we look at an approach, this is also very naturopathic, right? Is we want to be as comprehensive as possible. So it's not about a reductionistic one size fits all. You have the symptom that is memory loss, and so we're going to find the pill that replaces somehow replaces your memory. It just doesn't work that way. What we need to do is go in and assess the entire system. What are the things that are standing in the way of every neuron, of every cell in your body from functioning optimally? And so that list, it can feel a bit overwhelming, but even people who can, reversing is harder than preventing, right? So if we can kind of step in sooner, there's a lot more that can be done with less effort, less money, less time, but we can reverse it. And the way we reverse it is we get as comprehensive as possible. So what I have seen over and over again is the more that we can do, the better. We've had individuals move into Marama. They've been on the Bredesen protocol for 3, 4, 5 years. They move into Marama and they start getting more benefit because all of a sudden they are on an organic ketogenic diet every day. Now they're getting the benefits of the light therapies, the photobiomodulation. Now they're getting the benefits of some oxygen therapies. We're adding more and more the biomat, some of the engagement with other people. So once we put the lifestyle pieces together with the medical pieces, right, getting as comprehensive as possible, you get even more benefit. Now, logistically, I get it. That can feel very overwhelming. So we do what we can when we can.
One, you're actually talking about treating people and not disease processes.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. And so this whole component, so leading into, you did all of this kind of background research. People started referring in friends and family members because of the amazing results that you're getting. Then you created a care facility. What is the whole process then? Why is this not happening in medicine right now? Right?
It's challenging, right? And we have to be up to the challenge, and asking people to change their lifestyle, to change their diet, to exercise more, to, if you're looking, we've been socialized to think that there's one pill that will cure whatever we have, and that science is going to catch up, and that we're going to have an easy, simple answer, and we're going to just be able to swallow that pill and go to bed and be better in the morning.
Yeah, the better living through chemistry, right?
Yeah, it just doesn't work that way, particularly with neurodegeneration and Alzheimer's. And so what we need to do is take a much more comprehensive look. And so when I sit down with someone in my clinical practice, and also through the study is sort of designed around what I was seeing working really well, and we get results within 6 months. Right. So I expect someone to be measurably reversing dementia within 6 months. So we test that using an EEG called a WAVI. We also use the MoCA scoring. And for the clinical trial, we are using Cambridge Brain Sciences, which are validated testing, and then also the NIH toolbox. So validated metrics that show, either improvement or or progression of disease. And so we are seeing changes within 6 months when we can be really comprehensive and individualized and targeted. So what we look for is we systematically go through what is the environmental toxic burden. So toxins, infections, nutrients, stressors, and structural issues are the things that can really influence brain function. And so we want to systematically go through them. I have seen an 100%, now this is just my clinical practice, but I've seen, hundreds of patients struggling with cognitive decline, and 100% of them have some degree of measurable toxic burden. So this is heavy metals, mycotoxins, and chemical toxins. And this is why I've taken deep dives with Ritchie Shoemaker, and Bill Ray talks about heavy metals. Bill Walsh talks also about heavy metals. I've had the benefit of working with Dr. Crinian, Walter Crinian at one point, and it's so many, John Hibbs. And then of course, Neil Nathan diving deeply into mold. And Jill Krista, one of our colleagues, is also contributing really profoundly to that space at the moment. So I feel so fortunate to have been able to take deep dives with people to really understand that process, even though it's just one of the processes that we want to combine these approaches when it comes to dementia. So we need to understand their toxic burden and then get that out as fast as possible. When we can get the toxic burden down, cells start to work better. It's also nice because there's a finish line. For most people, as long as there's not an ongoing toxic exposure, we can check that box and move on as soon as we've gotten rid of those toxins. Sometimes there's a bit of a maintenance protocol, but for the most part, we can check that box and move on. And then hormonal replacement, so sex hormones like estrogen, testosterone, progesterone, DHEA, pregnenolone, those send signals. Also vitamin D, we sometimes forget that that's a hormone, and thyroid, of course. These send signals to the brain that they're associated with youth, right? So these are new. This says to the brain, make new memories, make new neurons, make new connections. And so we need those signals showing up. So we measure hormonal levels very thoroughly. And then structural things like molecular structure, apoegenetics, which I talked about briefly, that can have an influence on how quickly we make these beta amyloid plaques in response to some sort of infectious or toxic burden. And so then infections. Herpetic outbreaks. A lot of people don't realize that in the autopsies of the brain of someone who has Alzheimer's, we find the herpes virus, the Lyme spirochetes, and P. gingivalis. So dental infections will sometimes invade the brain. Sinus infections can go directly through the olfactory nerve up into the brain and trigger these inflammatory responses that manifest as symptoms of dementia. So getting pretty aggressive about treating those things, whether it's with the doctor, using pharmaceuticals. If you already have dementia symptoms and you're weighing kind of the benefits and risks, probably going to lean towards more aggressive treatment rather than waiting to treat when it comes to these infections, because they can be so triggering. So infections, toxins, of course, diet and lifestyle. We tend to start with a ketogenic diet. It's a brain healing diet. It's not for everyone, but for the vast majority of people, getting on the ketogenic diet for 3 to 6 months consistently in ketosis, keto adapting, and then switching to more of a paleo-Mediterranean diet, maybe a keto flex diet, tends to be very, very helpful. Sleep apnea, assessing for sleep apnea, optimizing sleep, extremely important. So this list goes on and on and on. Dr. Bredesen does a very good job kind of cataloging this. I could talk about it for days. And I often set aside, for every patient, we set aside at least 90 minutes to discuss these things. Early childhood trauma is another thing I ask every patient about. I think that as our medicine evolves, I think we'll be talking about this a lot more, because people who have experienced early childhood trauma seem to have limbic sort of programming that makes them more hypervigilant, makes at the cellular level. And so they're more apt, two people walk into a building with mold in it, and someone who's experienced limbic training in childhood that tells them that they're not safe, that they need to be hypervigilant, they're going to mount more of a response versus someone who has been in a safer environment, whether emotionally or even physically. So I think that we'll be exploring that further. I don't hear too many people talking about it sort of on the speaking circuit. However, it's something that I see come up consistently in my clinical practice.
Boy, that is really a smoking gun for sure. That component of stress response from when you look at the ACE scores, which are the adverse childhood experiences in North America, it's really a lot of trauma, and it doesn't get addressed at all in Western component. You're, seeing somebody in their 60s or 70s, even as early as late 40s. Now we're seeing a lot of folks, Blue Cross Blue Shield in their 2019 actuarial data was showing like the average age of mild cognitive impairment is 47 years old in their system. So it's like, moving earlier and earlier in our lives. That is a very comprehensive component. So what is how do you not get overwhelmed with that, right? Especially, one, our listeners, viewers it's either, looking at your parents, your grandparents, perhaps you're starting to exhibit some of these early memory deficits, or wondering like, gosh, my brain isn't working as well as it was. How do you not get overwhelmed with that?
Yeah, I don't want to forget head trauma. We talked about psycho-emotional trauma, but head trauma is another really big one that I ask everyone about. So what's nice about this is if you have a systematic approach, a lot of people say, no, I've never had a concussion, right? And we check that box. No, the toxins are gone. All right. There's no mercury. There's no lead. Great. We just check that box and move on. What we don't want to do is get 12 months into trying and go, oh, we never tested. We never looked. We never asked. And I'm sure that this list will grow as Dr. Bredesen continues his work, as hopefully I start to contribute. There's so many doctors, really great, wonderful doctors, Richard Isaacson. I'm sure you have a list of these people in your mind. But there's so many people who are doing really great work to contribute to this field right now. And we're adding to the list, not subtracting from it, right? We are complex beings. We are complex systems. We're networks upon networks. And so the goal, the body will heal itself if we give it the support that it needs. If we get the crap out of the way that's preventing it from functioning optimally, and we give it the support that it needs, even an older body has the potential to heal. And we see it all the time. So it's just about setting up that space, that lifestyle. It's setting up all of the factors so that the cards are in your favor. They're stacked in your favor in whatever way we can. And to not get overwhelmed, we do it systematically. So we go through, we just check the boxes, right? There's a process. And then the other thing is do the parts you can. So the trajectory of your health span shifts even with small changes, right? Even just cutting out processed foods, cutting out soda, if that's still something that you consume, right? I kind of laugh, but then every once in a while I get a patient in here who's like, oh yeah, I have a Diet Dr. Pepper every day. And I'm like, wait, what? Yeah. But just those small changes over time, making sure there's not mold in your house, right? If you're sleeping in a moldy bedroom, that is going to shift the trajectory of your health over time. So being, not hyper vigilant, but having feeling armed with the tools and the understanding of how these things work so that you can make good, healthy decisions. Yeah. The other thing that, like, if people took one thing away today, it would be that if you notice cognitive decline in yourself or in someone you love, do not ignore it. I think a lot of the messaging around dementia is that there's nothing you can do. And many neurologists are still saying this, and it's just wrong, right? That all I have for you is Namenda, and get your affairs in order, because it only goes in one direction, and that's downhill. That is not true. And so we are so much better. I am so much better at my job if I am preventing this than reversing it. It's harder to measure, of course, but we are so much better at prevention than reversal. So if we can prevent you from declining, if we can reverse that small amount of decline, that, I'm not putting my keys and, I can't remember where I put my keys or my phone before your driver's license is taken away, right? Like if we can catch someone whose MoCA score is in the 20s versus in the teens, I have much, much higher confidence. Now, that being said, I have learned the lesson this past year of never telling someone that there is not hope. We have a woman who moved it into Marama. I actually had told her caregiver in December of 2020 that I didn't think she was a great fit because her MoCA was a 20, or excuse me, her MoCA was a 0 out of 30. And so she was essentially nonverbal. So they waited a year, and then they said, hey, with COVID and everything, would you reconsider? And I said, well, let's talk through it. And so sure enough, she moved in January of 2021, a year later, with a MoCA of 0, essentially nonverbal. So now it's
Will
in
you tell
June.
people what the MoCA
Yeah.
is?
So the MoCA is the Montreal Cognitive Assessment. And this is where you identify like the rhinoceros and the lion, and you draw a clock. So some people may have done this. It's out of 30, and a score over 26 is considered normal. It's measurable decline, in the low 20s. And then in the teens, it's a noticeable decline typically. Now, different people present a little bit differently, but it's a great way to kind of pick up on cognitive decline. And it's a validated, none of these tests are perfect, but it's a validated approach. And so the MoCA, and hopefully I can throw around these numbers, and it gives people a little bit of a sense, if they've ever done one, about what a MoCA of 0 means. It means severe dementia. And so she moved in January, and we are now in June. She's been with us about 5 months. It was mid-January. And she, the other day, read a caregiver's name tag.
Wow.
And she now speaks in complete sentences very frequently, totally coherently and appropriately, right? Not something that she was doing at all when she moved in. And so I don't know if for her, she will ever, I'm not holding out. I'm not holding my breath that she will return to the workforce, right?
Yeah.
However, her experience with her caregivers day to day, she's no longer communicating by being like violent or having to like moan in pain. She can say it hurts. She can say I'm cold. She can say I'm hungry, and she can say that feels good. And she didn't have access to that before. So, full reversal is of course the goal. Everybody moving into Marama, I want them to return to independent living.
Yeah.
Now, is that possible for everyone? With what we know right now, probably not. But even shifting that experience that they have with their caregivers, with their family members, just having them a little bit more engaged shifts the entire experience for everyone. Right?
Oh yeah, by improving the quality of life across the board, that sends all kinds of ripples out. And I'm with you there. When you hear provider teams saying there's nothing we can do for you, and in fact, you're just going to get worse, get your affairs in order. It's like, are they not reading the literature? I mean, it's, what could it hurt to even try, right? And here we have plenty of research. We've got now clinical evidence, which is the most important thing. Like in the real world, these changes make a difference. So, I think a lot of folks, one of the things, so one, I'm going to cover the traumatic brain injury component, but also for folks watching on the genetics. So I often hear folks say, well, I have the ApoE4, I have the E3E4. My parents have it, my grandparents have it. What do you do? Are you doing comprehensive genetic testing on all of the patients? Are you doing targeted genetic testing? And then how do you have that conversation with people?
Yeah, so Intellex DNA is doing comprehensive, and I'm sure you've chatted with her. Yeah, so they're doing more comprehensive genetic workup. I am not incorporating that quite yet in my practice. So we are just looking at ApoE4 kind of status, ApoE status, and incorporating that into how we kind of think about things. What I want people to walk away with is definitely understand that just because you have ApoE4/4, where you have a very high risk, it's not a death sentence. What it is it's an invitation to work a bit harder to prevent it, right? Find out sooner. So don't wait. I think some people are hesitant to test their kids, and I can kind of understand that. But if I were 18 or 25 and my family had a history of ApoE4 and Alzheimer's, I would want to know immediately, because it would mean that I am not allowed to play football. I need to find sports and hobbies that do not involve concussions. I need to protect my brain in a way that maybe my neighbor or my spouse doesn't have to. And so that I think that that's really empowering information. And so not to be afraid of it, but to use it to lean in. I've got to protect my brain more.
Awesome. Okay, so then going into, so that's one, just information, more information empowers them to make decisions and maybe on a motivating factor. Traumatic brain injuries, epidemic beyond belief in North America. What do you see in your practice and in the research? What have you seen in association with dementias, Alzheimer's, et cetera?
Yeah, well, I have a 2.5-year-old, and I'll tell you, I want to put a helmet on her every day because of what I've seen. So do not hit your head. Avoid concussions. And if you've had one, or if a child has had one, they cannot have another one. So these accumulate. The inflammation and the trauma accumulates concussion after a concussion. So one, it's almost like a logarithmic curve, right? So one is something, but two is worth like having many, many more. So you really don't want to add those up. Protect the brain. And what we've seen is that, yes, this definitely puts you at risk. And the other piece here is get treatment as close to when the TBI happened as possible. A lot of people go into the emergency room, they get a scan, they say, okay, there's no bleed, there's no active hemorrhage, you're good, go home. Now you might want to ice or, stay in a room where there's not a lot of light because you'll be sensitive, take a Tylenol for your headache. And that is, again, well-meaning, I'm sure. However, the interventions that I would recommend are very high dose fish oils. So like about 10 grams a day of high dose, high quality omega-3s. Methyl B12, phosphatidylcholine, phosphatidylserine. If you can get oxygen, like hyperbaric treatment, or I really like the contrast oxygen, the LiVO2 therapies. We use this at Marama as well. And then also the red light therapies can be very, very helpful. Exosomes, potentially plasmapheresis. I get excited about some of these newer things, and really am looking forward to seeing where the data lies with that. But there are things that can be very, very helpful for rebuilding the brain. NAD plus IVs, that's another good one that we've seen do really, really well. The closer you can get to when it happened, the better. There's essentially like a 12 to 18 month window where these interventions have a massive impact. And I've seen a number of teens who have experienced something like this, and they've gotten full recovery. Now that doesn't mean you can go out and hit your head again, but it gives us hope that there's space for brain regeneration. I've also had folks, struggling with dementia who have also done some of these interventions, and it seems to be helpful. Again, in that case, we're being very comprehensive, right? We're changing their diet, their lifestyle. So we don't know exactly which one piece it is.
Yeah. And at that level, you really have to do the full court press. One component, I've seen folks 5 to 10 years after brain injuries where the team has kind of basically dumped them off, saying there's nothing more we can do. And these were folks that were really non-functional. They dropped out of school, et cetera. And I've had multiple patients go on to complete master's, PhD level dissertations. So it's never too late on these levels. I mean, the body is really miraculous given the right information. Again, not providing false hope or over-promising, but just to say, like, it's never too late. Of course, yes, it's much more important if you can get closer to the event and the trauma to treat. And also, one word on TBIs, it's not just blacking out, it's just hitting your head. It could be even just hitting your bum. Like my kids were, we live up here in Portland, Oregon, they're out snowboarding, hit an ice thing, whack their bottom on the ground. Well, that whole apparatus is in there, and they exhibited traumatic brain injury from falling on their bum. Man. Because, basically, our son came in and said, hey, I can't think, I can't read. We basically had to lock him in a dark room for a month. But he got recovered. But that was, you wouldn't think of a traumatic brain injury from a fall snowboarding, but it can happen. So it's not just when people hear TBI or traumatic brain injury, they're thinking like blacked out, or, did you pass out, or did you lose consciousness? It doesn't have to be that significant.
Yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned that. The other common kind of post-TBI syndrome is mood changes. And so being kind of wise to that, knowing that, okay, it doesn't always look like headaches and black eyes. It can, like you said, you can have a TBI from just bruising the spinal cord even. And so just that whole central nervous system, it's all connected, and we want to protect all of it.
So let's move into some of your research. That's so exciting that you've got a grant going. You're doing some specific research on reversing dementias. So what's going on there? What do you're doing your multi-pronged approach?
Yeah, thanks for asking. So the way that it's set up, the way that the study is designed is that we're almost done enrolling. It's so exciting because then we can really get the data out and the word out there. But so we're enrolling 25 participants and they're all going through this individualized approach. So that litany of things that I listed, we test them all and then some more. And we look for what are the things that we believe are basically contributing to the cognitive decline. And then from there, like I mentioned, we can check that box if it's not there and we can treat it if it is. And so if someone's got GI issues, we treat that aggressively. And we basically do 6 months of aggressive treatment. There's a health coaching component, there's an exercise component, there's dietary components, and then supplements and medications when appropriate. So we're doing all of those pieces and then we're measuring along the way at baseline at 3 months and at 6 months. And then after 6 months, we say it's up to you. You can stay, intimately involved in this process. You can continue to follow up. Or we've had one participant say, peace, I'm out. I'm going to Mexico to drink my margaritas on the beach. I'll see you guys in another 6 months. So then we follow up 6 months after that. So it'll be a full 12 months from baseline. And we'll essentially have, several arms of that second half of the study where people decide if they want to stay on the protocol or go off of it. And many people will probably fall somewhere in the middle. And so what we'll do is we'll be able to assess at an even finer level, how much of an impact did the intervention make? Right? You can imagine that if somebody was getting benefit and then they fell off the program and things reversed, then we can attribute that benefit probably more strongly to the intervention. So we'll be able to answer some of these questions. It's only 25 participants. And one of the most common sort of criticisms that comes up with this approach to reversing dementia is that there's not enough research. And I think that's very fair. There really is not enough research. And our research paradigm is not designed with individualized, integrative, comprehensive approaches, right? It's very much designed for the pharmaceutical industry, for a pill, keep the variables as limited as possible. And what we're doing is a clinical intervention and an observational trial. And it's just where we are in the process. Dr. Bredesen has also done observational trials before, or he published one recently. Before that, it was case studies. So now we're kind of in this, as we move up the hierarchy of the research studies, we are where we're meant to be. And my hope is that we contribute significantly to the research and what's out there. And that families really understand. The other very common question I was getting a year and a half ago, 2 years ago, was how likely, if I spend the money, if I take the time, if I rearrange my life to do this for my loved one, how likely is it that they're going to get better? And I'll tell you, it's very likely.
Yeah. Wow. That's awesome. That's really encouraging. And, you're seeing folks in your clinic, you're seeing folks at the facility that you've created, you're seeing folks in the research, and you're speaking from experience. So that is so exciting, so exciting. And, I think it's the full systems research approach where it's not a drug intervention, because lo and behold, we're heart-centered dynamic beings moving through time and space. It's multifactorial. And at that point, when your central nervous system is showing degradation, it's all hands on deck. Like, what the way that I describe that with my patients is like, look, we could do a one-off here and there, but you're going to get burnt out and we're not going to get any results. I'd rather get you to the top of the mountain, get the results, then we can start subtracting therapeutics. But let's get you a result first, because we're talking about your brain.
Yeah. And when we talk about, the cost is another thing that holds people back. And, unfortunately, a lot of this isn't covered by insurance, but the Biogen product that recently came out, right, they're saying $56,000 a year in just the IVs of that product, right? Not to mention the MRIs and not to mention all the doctor's visits, not to mention all the other things that need to go into reducing the side effects, because it's full of, there were lots of adverse events with that particular drug. And so they've got to do all kinds of things to mitigate that. That adds up. What we budgeted for our study participants was about $25,000. So less than half of what the Biogen product costs alone, right? So when we talk about cost, the cost of intervening, like what is the cost of your brain?
Yeah.
The other kind of big thing that I think about here, as a provider, and I know that you've, in our conversations previously and just getting to know you, I know how committed you are to just like making a difference in the world. I want the world to be a better place than when I got here.
Yeah.
And because of the impact I've had on it. And the way we treat our seniors as a society, just parking them in a home and saying, see you next Sunday, if you're lucky, is really just disheartening, because our elders, they are at the peak of their wisdom and experience. They have so much to offer. So when I think about, not just the dollars and cents of this, but the value, the resource that we're squandering by allowing our seniors to degenerate in this way without actively preventing it, without stopping it. Like, it's just not right.
Yeah.
We have to, this cannot go on. It is not functional. And we basically take the people from 18 to 55, 65, and they take care of our seniors and they take care of our little ones. And why not kind of create something where there's just so many other options. I get really excited about all of the creative solutions to this.
Yeah.
And it's one step at a time, but there are indigenous cultures that do a really good job of integrating the youth with the elders and making sure that wisdom is passed down through generations. There's just so many better ways to do this, to do aging. And the demographics are just astounding, right? Like, we have this massive, the baby boomers there's a massive population shift that's happening. So we're going to have a lot of elders. How do we want our loved ones taken care of? How do we want to be taken care of when we arrive at 70 and 80 and 90? And that if we don't do something about it, if we don't shift this right now, then a lot of us think that will never happen to me. I'm even in this space, right? And I'm still like, oh no, my mom will never go into residential care. No, I would never end up there, right? And yet the likelihood is that you will. And so what do you want it to look like?
Yeah. So let's talk back to the facility that you created. What does that look like? Like, what have you created in that ideal sense?
Yeah. So I kind of think of the 4 pillars of Marama. So Marama is a Maori word. It's an indigenous word from New Zealand, and it means moonlight. And the way I think of it is that we are that light shining as guides, like shining the way through the darkness towards that dawn and awakening from Alzheimer's. So through that dark time when you can't remember, like we're there to be your sort of shepherd and guide through that process. And so Marama has 4 kind of pillar components, and one is the non-toxic environment. This is very passive. If you've ever seen a mold patient, or if you've ever been a mold patient, you know how debilitating, how like almost paralyzing it is to think about moving, to think about remediating. What stuff do I keep? What do I get rid of? All of these decisions that have to be made when your brain feels like it's not working. So Marama is a non-toxic experience. We test aggressively for mold. There has been several leaks, and one in a shower, one under the dishwasher. And within 24 hours, we have somebody out there checking to make sure there's no mold, there's no moisture, that is gone, that there's no mold in that house. We also use organic mattresses, organic bedding, sheets, non-toxic cleaning products, non-toxic paints, everything that we can make non-toxic there is. And then the diet, so the kitchen is kind of another pillar, and that is 100% organic and keto flex. So we do 5, once someone's keto adapted, they're 5 days keto, mild keto, and then 2 days kind of flexing off with there's a beautiful garden with like some of the best apples I've ever tasted grow on the property. So we indulge in those on the weekends. Apricots right now are going off. Wow. And so the gardens are, the environment is another piece of that. We have 2 big greenhouses, lots of fresh fruits and veggies that are growing on the property that the residents get to engage. So the activities, so the kitchen, the environment, the non-toxic environment, the activities are basically from morning to night is all about brain regeneration, brain stimulation when appropriate. So we use, I love, I'm in the neurohacking space in that world. So I love using the devices. So we use LiVo2 contrast oxygen. We use the Violite, we use the Juve lights. We use Brain Tap. Dr. Patrick Porter, yes. He developed that. And he's been very, very supportive. We use a biomat, we use saunas, we use rebounders. And all of our staff understand what's going on here, right? So they are very encouraging because some of it is, we've just got to get out there. So there's one TV in the house and it's behind a cabinet. So we really have to want to use it for sing-alongs or for, sometimes they want to engage in the news when there's an election, something big coming up. But really after dinner, they play Uno, they play other games. There's puzzles, not just puzzles like putting together pictures that are cut into puzzles, but brain puzzles that stimulate memory and stimulate, that muscle. So we also do the Kira yoga and meditation.
The Satha Nama.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes.
So
I love that.
Every day for 12 minutes after breakfast.
Yes.
So, because that has really good data.
Will you share that? Sure. Let's share that. Let's talk about that one because
Yes, so it's 12 minutes and you take your thumb and pointer finger, index finger, and it's sa on the first one, then ta on the middle finger, na on your ring finger, and ma, sa ta na ma on the pinky. And it basically just go through that over and over and over for 12 minutes. And there's great data.
Yes.
And then we test Brain HQ. We're very aligned with Dr. Bredesen and Apollo. So we use Recode for all of our participants, all of our residents at Marama. So they're keeping track there of their Brain HQ numbers, of their WAVI and MoCA. And so we get to see the improvement over time, which has been really exciting and fun.
That is phenomenal. So you've got a community built in, you've got everybody aligned, moving in the same direction. You've got their diet dialed in, their exercise and activities. It's a healing environment.
Yes. And then thank you. I have a fourth pillar, which is the caregivers and the community. So, so important is, I actually was a little bit concerned. This was one of the reasons I felt like the woman I shared with you, Kathleen, was maybe not a good fit when she had a MoCA of 0. Yeah. I was concerned that the other residents might feel, like, am I going in that direction? It might be anxiety provoking. It was exactly the opposite. So the moment Kathleen showed up, the other residents started sort of like caring for her. They had, they have more cognitive ability, more capacity, and they kind of took her under their wing, very engaged with her, asking how she is, asking how they can help with her. And it gave them a sense of purpose. Wow. Also, just watching the relationships that spring up among the residents. They've created a poetry club, and it's just really, really sweet to see how they connect with each other, and then also the staff and that excellent caregiving.
So you do training for the staff on all of the pillars and the philosophy, and they're getting to actually take part in some of the therapeutics as well. Yeah. How long does somebody stay in the facility, or what do you project? Is it a long-term care facility, short-term care?
Yeah, so we have limited beds right now. My goal, my number one goal, if Marama would be successful, of course, this is it. If the entire industry came in our direction.
Yes.
That's all I'm asking for.
Well, I envision, I really want to help you on that. Getting that as the model, it just seems like that is what needs to happen. And as the baby boomers age and start moving into this part of the healthcare system, I think they're going to demand it. And, having that, I learned of, there's a facility down in Florida where they have hyperbaric oxygen and IV and other things like that in a retirement center. That just seems like a no-brainer, literally pun intended. Yeah. In that's what I want to retire into. If I retire, I want to have those resources and the philosophy behind it of, you have to address your diet. You've got to get your environmental stuff together. Like your 4 pillars are perfect for this. And it seems like that should take off. Doc?
Yeah, that's the hope. I think we need to change the narrative, right? A lot of people think there's nothing you can do, and that's just not the case. And so bringing that hope back that no, there is something, and why not? Of course, my goal is that people return to independent living. So your question was, how long do people stay? Yeah. A minimum of 6 months is what we ask for, because it really does, this is not a process, particularly if somebody has measurable decline, just like in the study. Sometimes we're getting results at 3 months, but sometimes it is 6 months or 12 months. And so we have a couple who has been there over 12 months and they're planning to stay until we kick them out. Like they just want to stay as long as possible. And we've had another couple who came and got some benefit and then they moved home. And so, and we would like to be supporting people as they transition back home to independent living. They have the recipes, that they have the cookbook, that they know who to call to look for mold, that they, they have the resources and support to manage all of these components, because it's a lot. I mean, even for someone with full cognitive capacity, this is a lot to take on. So we want to make sure that it's a bit easier for people. And some of that happens at a societal level. And some of it is like, we just have to put in the extra effort these days to make it happen, to really take care of ourselves and prioritize our health.
What are you showing with the WAVI? So the WAVI for folks it's an EEG measurement. And so you're showing, that's part of your full evaluation and follow-up with folks. So I'm imagining you're seeing changes there, and did you include that in your study as well?
Yeah, that's one of the metrics we're looking at. So what the WAVI measures and what this particular EEG machine measures is a P300. And so P300 is basically asking the question is how long, if your brain gets a signal, which in this case with the WAVI, it's an auditory signal, it's a beep. When your brain gets a signal, how long does it take for your brain waves or what we can measure on the top of your head and on your skull, how long does it take for your brain to recognize that there was a stimuli? So that's the P300. We also can measure what your reaction time is. So we measure this by having you click a button on the mouse. And once your brain has acknowledged there's a stimuli, then you react by pressing the button. And that time, that's another time. It's just like running a mile. How fast is your P300? How fast is your reaction time? We can also look at voltage, which is how basically energy production. Not only are we biochemical, we are electrical. And so what we can measure is some of that electrical voltage, and having a certain degree of that is helpful for producing energy. So all of those things kind of need to work together. And what we can see is as people get better, these metrics kind of get better. Not all of them, not all the time. We can also look at brain waves and brain wave ratios. And we're still learning, I think, what measurements exactly point to, people really improving. So hopefully our study will contribute to that data. WAVI is really great about partnering with clinicians and doing data collection. They're also partnering with BrainTap, and BrainTap, they have seen a measurable difference in folks with dementia with just 20 minutes twice a day. So the goal, certainly at my clinic and at Marama, is to take, read all the science and take all of these amazing things that are sort of disparate at this point and put them all together in one place so that somebody can get the maximum benefit.
I love it. Stacking that stuff is the way to go. There's your neurohacker coming out in you. That's awesome. I want to make sure at the last piece of this, I want to mention your Reverse Alzheimer's Summit. So not only did we title this Reverse Dementia, but you've got a whole summit coming up in August. We're going to put the links in the show notes for folks to interact there, because this is such a huge topic. And there are so many facets. So you've got a big summit coming up here in a month, and maybe mention that reverse.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us and for contributing your expertise. So important. I was so grateful to be able to get to know a little bit about what you're doing in your practice, and you're contributing so much in this space. So thank you. I've had the privilege of picking the brains of experts, all of these things that I mentioned, hormones and toxins and all of these pieces. We're trying to put them together. We could never cover all of it in an hour, and even over 40 hours. I feel like we're just scratching the surface, but it's really exciting. It's been a huge privilege to get to know some of these really amazing scientists and clinicians who are contributing profoundly to this field and really advancing it and getting us those solutions. So we'll do deep dives into a lot of these pieces. And I would love for listeners here to join us there.
Awesome. So the links are going to be in the show notes. Dr. Sandison, any last parting wisdom for our viewers and listeners?
Oh, thank you. I think protect your brain and act quickly. That really, if I left anyone with one thing, if you notice cognitive decline, go to a doctor like Dr. Greg or myself. Find a doctor who's doing Dr. Bredeson's work. Find someone who knows what they're doing, who's going to show you the path to reversing that, because it's possible.
Love it. Thank you so much, everybody. This is What the Health. If you got some valuable information out of here or some ahas, please take a moment. Think of 2 people in your life that could benefit from this life-changing information. I mean, reversing dementia and Alzheimer's, it is possible. You're hearing it from clinicians that are actually seeing the results clinically. So this is the future of where we're going. Let's make it go faster. Share this episode. And let them know why you thought of them. Not that like, hey, you're losing your mind, Aunt Joan, but maybe there's some information here. Also, if you like the show, please give us a 5-star rating out there on your favorite podcast platform. Super appreciate you, and we will see you next week here on the Contact Talk Radio, Tuesdays from 2 to 3 p.m. Pacific time. See you next week.